In Ajilete Village, nestled deep within the rolling hills of the Yoruba countryside, there lived a legend in the form of a 16-year-old girl. Her name was Amina Yusuf, but in the schoolyards and dusty roads of the village, her name carried weight far beyond her years. Amina was not just a student, she was a storm. Teachers shook their heads at the mere mention of her name. Students whispered about her daring exploits. And parents lamented to the village elders, praying she wouldn't corrupt their more obedient children. You see, Amina wasn't like anyone else in Ajilete. Where most girls her age walked through the world with polite words and downcast eyes, Amina charged forward with fire in her veins. She didn't just break rules, she shattered them, danced on their remains, and dared anyone to stop her. She wasn't a bully. No, Amina didn't need to bully. She had something far more powerful, an unshakable confidence that cowed even the boldest. In her world, fear simply did not exist. Her notoriety spread like wildfire. There was the time she climbed onto the roof of the school during morning assembly because she said the headmaster's speeches were boring. Or the time she marched into the staff room uninvited to demand that one of the teachers change her grade. And then there was her infamous sense of justice, Amina's kind of justice, which once had her locking two boys in a classroom overnight after catching them stealing a girl's lunch money. She's fearless, people would say, shaking their heads. Others would mutter under their breath, one day, that girl's fire will burn too hot. And that day came on an overcast Tuesday afternoon. It started innocently enough, or at least as innocent as things could be where Amina was involved. A simple lunchtime squabble. A boy named Kunle, in a moment of unwise bravery, had taken the last piece of roasted corn from the vendor outside school. Unfortunately for him, the vendor had been saving that piece for Amina. When Amina found out, the entire courtyard fell silent, like the air itself was afraid of what might come next. You think you're brave, eh? Hand it over, now. But Kunle wasn't ready to back down in front of the crowd. It's just corn, he said with a smirk. It's not like your name is written on it. A gasp rippled through the students. Amina's name didn't need to be written on anything. It was understood. And when Kunle added under his breath, the Queen of Ajilete has competition now, Amina snapped. She lunged, not with violence, but with the ferocity of her presence, and Kunle stumbled back. The corn fell to the ground, and for a moment it seemed like the dust had settled. But then a pair of green camouflage boots stepped in. Heavy boots. Boots that made even Amina pause, if only for a second. "Oh, Joe, stop it," came the deep, commanding voice. It was Sergeant Bala, one of the soldiers stationed at the checkpoint near the school. The military had a small presence in Ajilete Village to manage security on the main roads, but they rarely interfered in the affairs of the community. This time, however, the commotion had drawn one of them in. Everyone froze. Sergeant Bala was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried the kind of authority that belonged to a man accustomed to being obeyed. But Amina saw authority as something to be challenged. "This has nothing to do with you," she said coolly, her voice carrying the kind of confidence most adults lacked when speaking to a soldier. The students around her scattered slightly, not wanting to be caught anywhere near what might happen next. "Go back to class," the sergeant replied, his tone firm but not unkind. "Both of you." But Amina didn't move. Her defiance wasn't loud or dramatic. It was in the way she stood her ground and stared Bala in the eye. To her, this wasn't discipline. It was a challenge, and challenges were meant to be won. "Do you think because you have a uniform, you can order me around?" she said, a slight smirk playing on her lips. The sergeant's brow furrowed. "This is not the time to argue," he said. "Walk away, girl, before you make a mistake." But those words, "before you make a mistake," triggered something in Amina. In her world, mistakes didn't exist. To challenge her actions was to question her power, and no one, not even a soldier, could do that unscathed. So in one swift motion, she did the unthinkable. Her hand lashed out, not in a shove or a push, but in a slap. A sharp, resounding slap that struck Sergeant Bala across the face. For a moment, it was as if the entire universe had paused. The courtyard held its breath, the wind stilled, and even the birds seemed to stop mid-flight. A soldier. She had slapped a soldier. The look on Sergeant Bala's face wasn't anger, it was pure, stunned disbelief. He blinked slowly, as if trying to process what had just happened. Around them, the crowd of students gasped, the sound spreading like ripples in a pond. Amina stood there, proud and unflinching, as if daring him to retaliate. But her confidence, her armor of defiance, was slowly beginning to crack. She'd crossed a line, and deep down, she knew it. "What have you done?" Bala finally said, his voice low and dangerous. There was no yelling, no immediate reaction, just a question. A question that carried the weight of consequences far beyond Amina's understanding. Within minutes, the school was in chaos. The principal was summoned, the soldiers from the checkpoint arrived, and soon, Amina found herself surrounded. Not by students who feared her, but by a system that wouldn't bend to her will. She was escorted off school grounds, her usual bravado muted. The crowd of students stayed back, watching in silence as the girl who had seemed untouchable was led away. No one knew what would happen next, but the air was thick with anticipation and fear. For days, the village buzzed with rumors. Some said Amina had been taken to a military barrack, where they were teaching her a lesson about respect and authority. Others said her family had been called to plead on her behalf. But no one saw her, and no one dared to ask too many questions. Then, after what felt like an eternity, she returned. But she wasn't the same. Gone was the storm, the fire that had made Amina the queen of Ajilete. She walked through the school gates quietly, her head held high, but her presence no longer overwhelming. It was as if something inside her had shifted. A realization, perhaps, that there were forces in the world greater than even her own willpower. A week after her return, Amina stood in front of the entire school during assembly. The principal handed her the microphone, and for the first time, there was no defiance in her tone. "I made a mistake," she said, her voice clear but softer than anyone had ever heard it. "And I've learned that being strong does not mean being reckless. I've learned there are battles not worth fighting." The students listened, stunned by her humility. Even the teachers exchanged glances, unsure of what had caused this transformation. But Amina didn't explain further. She didn't need to. From that day on, Ajilete Village spoke of Amina not just as the girl who slapped a soldier, but as the girl who had learned and taught others that true strength isn't about defiance. It's about knowing when to fight and when to walk away. And in time, Amina's legacy became something far greater than fear. It became respect.